6 o'clock on Thanksgiving morning is colder than you expect. It is the kind of cold that does not just chill your skin, it settles in your bones, sharp and unrelenting. I stood in the driveway, my breath misting in the gray pre-dawn light, watching my family load the limo. The trunk was already swallowing 4 sets of matching leather luggage, cognac brown, monogrammed, pristine. My father, Richard, was directing the driver with the kind of frantic energy reserved for high-stakes business mergers, not family vacations. My mother, Susan, was already inside, checking her makeup in the vanity mirror, ensuring her effortless travel look was camera-ready. And then there was my sister, Chloe. Chloe was 25 and lived her life through the lens of a ring light. She stood by the open door of the limo, scroll-checking her phone, already mentally captioning the day. She looked up at me, her eyes sweeping over my windbreaker and jeans with a practiced dismissal. "Where is my bag?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the quiet street. Dad said there was plenty of room. Richard did not turn around. He just kept gesturing at the driver. Chloe let out a short, sharp sigh, like I was a pop-up ad she could not close. She reached into the back seat. But instead of pulling out a ticket or an itinerary, she pulled out a binder. A heavy, white plastic binder, bulging with papers. She walked over and shoved it into my hands. "You don't fit the aesthetic, Alyssa," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was matter-of-fact, clinical. "This is a brand trip. Sponsors are watching. We need everything to look cohesive. And you," she gestured vaguely at my entire existence, "you just disrupt the visual." "The visual?" I repeated, looking down at the binder. House Sitter's Guide was written on the front in Susan's sprawling cursive. "Mom and Dad agree," she continued, already turning back to the car. "It is better this way. We will be posting a lot. It would be weird if you were just there in the background." Richard finally looked over his shoulder. "We left a list of things that need doing while we are gone. The gutters, the garden. Make yourself useful, Alyssa. We will see you in 10 days. He slammed the trunk. They got in. The windows rolled up, tinting them into obscurity. I stood there, holding the cold plastic binder against my chest, as the long black car pulled away, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust and silence. The dust settled around my boots. I was not a daughter or a sister in that moment. I was a flaw in their composition, a smudge on the lens. Before we find out how Alyssa handles this, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the vacuum they left behind. The house was silent, but their presence was still suffocating. The air in the foyer held the lingering, expensive scent of Susan's perfume, sandalwood, and jasmine, a sharp contrast to the object in my hands. The binder smelled like a damp basement. It was heavy, thick with the weight of expectation. I walked into the kitchen, tossed it onto the marble island, and flipped it open. There was no thank you card. There was no envelope with cash for groceries or gas. There was just a spreadsheet. Day 1, water. The hydrangeas, use the filtered hose. Day 2, dust the crown molding in the dining room. Day 3, meet the pool guy, do not let him in see. It went on for 10 days. A meticulously itemized list of labor. They bad not just excluded me from their vacation, they had hired me as their uncompensated staff. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I waited for the tears to come. I waited for the crushing weight of rejection to buckle my knees. But it did not happen. Instead, a strange, cold clarity washed over me. It felt like a fever breaking. For 28 years, I had been operating under a silent contract. If I was useful enough, good enough, and quiet enough, I would eventually earn my place at the table. But looking at that spreadsheet, I realized the contract was a fraud. I was not an investment to them. I was an appliance. And appliances do not get vacations. I did not scream. I did not throw the binder across the room. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and sat down on one of the bar stools. I logged into my bank account. There was a savings sub-account I had named Family Emergency Fund. It held $32,000 money I had scraped together from freelance landscaping gigs and overtime, money I had mentally earmarked for when Richard's risky investments inevitably failed again, or when they needed help with the mortgage. It was my safety net for them. I opened a new tab. I did not look for deals. I did not look for budget options. I typed Bora Bora into the search bar. I found the most exclusive resort on the island, the kind with private butlers and glass floors. I selected an overwater bungalow with a private infinity pool and a view of Mount Otimanu. I added the first-class flight package. I added the spa treatment bundle. I added the private sunset cruise. The total came to $30,450. My finger hovered over the mouse. $30,000. It was a down payment on a house. It was a new car. It was a year of security. But as I looked at the house-sitter's guide sitting next to my computer, I realized it was actually a severance package. I was firing myself from the role of the dutiful daughter. I clicked confirm. The screen flashed green. Your booking is confirmed. The money vanished from the account. The number dropped from 32,000 to just over 1,000. I felt a rush of adrenaline so potent it made my hands shake. It was not fear. It was the intoxicating lightness of burning a bridge while you were still standing on it. I closed the laptop. I grabbed a neon yellow sticky note from the junk drawer and a black Sharpie. I wrote 3 words, pressing down hard enough to bleed through the paper. Figure it out. I stuck the note to the front of the white binder. I did not water the hydrangeas. I did not check the mail. I walked out the front door, locked it behind me, and threw the key under the mat. My Uber was already waiting. 24 hours later, I was standing on a sheet of tempered glass, watching a black-tip reef shark circle beneath my bare feet. The air in the bungalow smelled like vanilla and sea salt, a world away from the musty scent of the binder I had left on the kitchen counter. I walked out onto the private deck. The Pacific Ocean stretched out in every direction, a blinding, impossible turquoise that made my eyes ache. It was paradise. But as I leaned against the railing, watching the sun hit the water, my mind drifted back to that moment in the driveway. I knew the question everyone would ask. Why did I take the binder in the first place? Why did I let them hand it to me? Why didn't I throw it in the gutter right then and there? It is easy to call it weakness. It is easy to say I was a doormat, but it was not that simple. It was the invisible chain of the survivor. When you grow up in a house where love is a limited resource, you learn to become indispensable. You learn that affection is not a gift. It is a paycheck, and you have to earn it every single day. I did not take that binder because I agreed with them. I took it because, for 28 years, I had been conditioned to believe that my utility was my rent. I remembered being 12 years old, sitting at the dining room table, doing Chloe's pre-algebra homework while she practiced her poses in the mirror. Richard had patted my head and said, "Good girl, you are so helpful." That was the currency. Helpful, useful, efficient. I was not the pretty one. I was not the charismatic one. I was the one who knew how to reset the router when the internet went down. I was the one who balanced Susan's checkbook when she overspent on networking events. I was the staff. Even my career choice had been co-opted. I became a landscape architect because I loved the earth, the structure of things. But to them, it just meant free labor. I spent 3 summers designing and planting their backyard, a tiered English garden that added $50,000 to their property value. Susan hosted a garden party to show it off. She told everyone she had visioned it. I was in the kitchen, refilling the ice bucket. I didn't correct her. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I poured enough sweat and skill into their lives, they would eventually look at me and see a daughter, not a service provider. But standing there in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles from their demands, the chain finally snapped. I looked at the water. It was vast and indifferent. It did not need me to fix it. It did not need me to prune it or organize it. It just was. I realized then that the debt was fraudulent. I had spent my entire life paying installments on a relationship they had never intended to honor. I had been buying shares in a company that was bankrupt. I walked back into the bedroom and picked up my phone. It was still connected to the resort Wi-Fi. I knew they wouldn't land in the Mediterranean for another few hours. I knew the moment they landed, the texts would start. Where are you? Did you water the plants? Why is not the mail on the counter? I did not want to hear it. I did not want to explain. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Dad. Block. I scrolled to Mom. Block. I scrolled to Chloe. Block. It felt like cutting a wire on a bomb. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with peace. I put the phone down on the nightstand. I stripped off my travel clothes, put on a swimsuit, and walked to the edge of the infinity pool. I didn't fit their aesthetic. That was fine, because looking around at this private, expensive, beautiful world I had built for myself, I realized they didn't fit mine. It was day 3. The sun in Bora Bora rose like a promise, turning the sky into a riot of gold and violet. I woke up early, pulled on my swimsuit, and walked out to the edge of my deck. The water was perfectly still, like glass waiting to be shattered. I set up my phone on a small tripod, hit record, and dove in. I did not edit the video. I didn't add a filter to make the water look bluer, it didn't need it. I didn't add trending music. I just posted the raw clip. 30 seconds of me swimming through crystal clear water as the sun crested the horizon, the silence broken only by the gentle lap of waves. The caption was simple, unfiltered. Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. By lunch, it had 50,000. People were hungry for something real. In a feed full of curated perfection and staged moments, my quiet morning swim felt like a breath of fresh air. Meanwhile, 7,000 miles away, the Mediterranean was having a bad day. I checked Chloe's Instagram. Her brand trip was a disaster. The sky in her photos was a flat, angry gray. The yacht looked cramped, the lighting harsh. In one video, you could see Susan shivering in her linen wrap, trying to smile while holding a glass of wine that looked ready to blow away in the wind. The comments were sparse, polite but unimpressed. Then, the notifications started. They had seen my post. My email pinged first. It was Richard. The subject line was simply, "Take it down. Alyssa, we are seeing your posts. This is incredibly selfish. You are confusing people. Everyone thinks we are on separate trips. You are making us look uncoordinated and dysfunctional. We are trying to launch Chloe's brand, and you are distracting from the main event. Take it down immediately. We can discuss this when we get back." I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the email and saved it to a folder I named Evidence. Then came the DMs from Chloe. She had created a burner account. I knew it was her because the handle was LuxLife Observer, a name she had brainstormed years ago. "You're pathetic," the message read. "You think going to a fancy resort makes you special? You're just jealous you weren't invited to the real trip. Everyone is asking why you aren't here. You're ruining everything." I read the messages while sipping a coconut water by my private pool. A slow smile spread across my face. They weren't mad that I was gone. They weren't worried about my safety. They were furious because I was happy. It was cognitive dissonance in real time. For years, they had built their self-worth on the idea that they were the main characters and I was the supporting cast. They needed me to be less than them to feel superior. By going to a place that was arguably more beautiful, more exclusive, and doing it entirely on my own dime, I had shattered their hierarchy. I was not just out of the frame. I was in a better movie. They were starving for their narcissistic supply, and I had cut off the tap. I didn't respond to Richard. I didn't block the burner account. Instead, I posted another photo. This time, it was just my feet propped up on the railing, a book in my lap, the endless ocean stretching out before me. The caption read, "Sometimes, the best view is the one you find when you stop looking for approval." I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and ordered room service. The war had started, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for their attention. I was fighting for my peace. And I was winning. It was day 6. I was halfway through a papaya salad when my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Kelsey. Kelsey was my cousin on Susan's side, but unlike the rest of them, she was sane. She worked in crisis PR in Chicago and had a nose for disaster. "Alyssa," she said, her voice tight. "Are you sitting down?" I am lying on a daybed, I replied. Why? Because Chloe just nuked her career. Go look at her feed. I opened Instagram. The first thing I saw was a photo on Chloe's grid. It showed the four of them, Richard, Susan, Chloe, and me standing on the deck of a yacht, raising champagne glasses. The caption read, "Family reunion in the Med. So glad Alyssa could finally join us. Missed you. Number family first, number yacht life. Number reunited." I zoomed in. The photo of me was cut from a picture taken at my graduation 3 years ago. The lighting was wrong, the sun was hitting my face from the left, while everyone else was lit from the right. My feet were floating slightly above the deck. And most damning of all, I was holding a diploma, which she had attempted to edit into a champagne flute, but the edge of the leather folder was still visible. It was desperate, it was clumsy, and it was a lie. She is trying to reclaim the narrative. Kelsey said in my ear, "Sponsors are asking where you are because your content is performing better than hers. She is trying to pretend you're there to stop the bleeding. She is lying to 50,000 people," I said, a cold fury settling in my chest. "She is using my image to sell her fake life." "So what do we do?" Kelsey asked. "We can ignore it." "No," I said, "we don't ignore it. We escalate professionally." I did not comment on the post. I didn't send a DM. I opened my laptop and drafted a formal DMCA takedown notice. I cited unauthorized use of my likeness for commercial purposes. I sent it to Instagram's legal team. I sent a copy to every single brand tagged in Chloe's post. Then, I went live. I walked out to the edge of my bungalow deck. I held up a copy of Le Monde, the international edition I had picked up at the airport, dated today. The headline was in French. Behind me, the unmistakable peak of Mount Otemanu rose from the turquoise water. "Hi everyone," I said to the camera. The view count ticked up rapidly. Just wanted to clarify something. I am currently in Bora Bora, alone. Any reports of my presence in the Mediterranean are greatly exaggerated. I smiled, took a sip of my drink, and ended the stream. The internet did the rest. Within 20 minutes, the comments on Chloe's post were a bloodbath. "Why is her foot floating? Is that a diploma? Why lie about your sister?" Brands started pulling their tags. The partnership labels disappeared. An hour later, the photo vanished. My phone rang. It was Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. Then Richard. Voicemail. Then Susan. Voicemail. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling because I had popped their balloon. I had exposed the artifice. For years, they had relied on my silence to maintain their image of a perfect, cohesive family. They assumed I would play along because I always had. But I wasn't playing anymore. I was the one holding the remote. I texted Kelsey. She replied, "It's not just done, it's legendary." I sat back and watched the sunset. The sky turned a bruised purple. I felt a pang of sadness for Chloe, not for the influencer she tried to be, but for the sister she never was. She was so busy curating a life that she forgot to actually live one. And now, she had neither. 10 days in paradise changed me. I came back with sun-bleached hair, a tan that wouldn't wash off, and a spine made of steel. But the homecoming was short-lived. I was unpacking my suitcase, shaking the last of the Bora Bora sand out of my sneakers, when my phone rang. "Alyssa?" It was the branch manager from my bank. "We flagged a suspicious transaction request this morning. Someone tried to wire $15,000 from your main savings account to a company called Aegean Luxury Charters. We denied it because the signature didn't match, but we wanted to alert you." "15,000? I sat down on the edge of my bed. "Who authorized it?" The paperwork was faxed from a hotel in Mykonos. It was signed by Richard Sterling, acting as power of attorney. My blood ran cold. My father didn't have power of attorney. He never had. "Send me a copy of the document he used," I said, my voice shaking. When the email arrived, I opened the attachment. It was a contract. But it wasn't just a power of attorney form. It was a licensing agreement. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until they landed on the project title, the Viridian Eco-Community Landscape Design. The Viridian Project. It was my magnum opus, a proprietary, sustainable landscape design I had been working on for 3 years in my spare time. It was my intellectual property, my retirement plan, my dream. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature forged in my father's heavy, distinctive hand. He had sold my design to a developer for a lump sum of $40,000. And he had used $15,000 of it to pay for the damages they had caused on the yacht during a drunken celebration night. I felt sick. Physically sick. I walked into the kitchen and picked up the white binder I had left on the counter 10 days ago. I flipped to the back pocket. It was empty, but then I noticed a thin slit in the plastic lining. I reached in and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original draft of the sale contract. They had hidden it in the very symbol of my servitude, assuming I would be too busy scrubbing their floors to ever find it. This wasn't just a bad family dynamic. This wasn't just narcissism. This was grand larceny. This was fraud. This was theft of intellectual property. I looked at the signature again. It wasn't just a forgery. It was an act of ownership. He truly believed that, because he was my father, my mind belonged to him. My talent belonged to him. My future belonged to him. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I never thought I would use against my own blood. "Police department," the dispatcher answered. "I'd like to report a theft," I said. "A significant one." Then I called the developer who had bought my design. I spoke to their legal team. I explained the situation. I sent them the proof of my ownership and the police report number. They were horrified. They froze the project immediately. They froze the funds. My father was in Greece, probably ordering another bottle of wine on a tab he couldn't pay, completely unaware that he had just become a felon. I sat at my kitchen table, the forged contract in front of me. I remembered all the times he had told me I was helpful, all the times he had praised my loyalty. He hadn't been raising a daughter, he had been grooming an asset. But assets don't call the police. Daughters do. And I was done being both. My phone rang 2 days later. It was Kelsey. "They are back," she said. "They landed an hour ago, and they are headed to your house." "I know," I said, watching the GPS tracker on Richard's car move steadily toward my address. "I am ready." I walked out onto the porch. The garden I had designed for myself was in full bloom, native grasses swaying in the breeze, drought-resistant succulents thriving in the rock beds. It was low maintenance, sustainable, and beautiful. It was everything their garden wasn't. A taxi pulled into the driveway. Richard, Susan, and Chloe spilled out. They looked wrecked. Richard was pale, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled. Susan was crying, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. Chloe looked small, stripped of her filters and angles. They dragged their luggage up the walkway. "Alyssa," Susan choked out. "Thank God. We tried to call. Our cards were declined. We barely made it back." "I know," I said. "We need to talk," Richard said, his voice raspy. "There has been a misunderstanding. A terrible mistake with the bank. We need you to fix it. We need you to call the developer and tell them it was a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," I said. "It was theft." "We are family," Chloe shouted, her voice cracking. "You called the police on Dad? Are you insane? He could go to jail." "He committed a felony," I replied calmly. "Actions have consequences." "We did it for us," Susan wailed. "For the family. We just wanted one nice trip. We wanted to build something for Chloe. We were going to pay you back once the brand deals came in." "With what?" I asked. "With the money you stole from my future? With the career you tried to build on a lie?" I reached behind me and picked up the white binder. The House Sitter's Guide. I walked down the steps and held it out to Richard. He stared at it, confusion warring with fear in his eyes. "You said I didn't fit the aesthetic," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You were right. I don't fit the aesthetic of fraud. I don't fit the aesthetic of exploitation, so I removed myself from the picture and from the lawsuit. I'm not pressing charges personally, but the state is. And the developer is. You're on your own. I dropped the binder into his hands. He flinched as if it were hot. Alyssa, please, he whispered. We have nowhere to go. The house. The mortgage hasn't been paid in 3 months. We used that money for the trip too. Figure it out, I said. I turned around and walked back up the steps. I didn't look back. I walked into my house, closed the heavy oak door, and turned the lock. 3 months later, I was kneeling in the dirt, planting new bulbs for spring. The sun was warm on my back. My phone was playing a podcast about sustainable architecture. It was quiet. Richard had taken a plea deal. 5 years probation, restitution, and community service. He was working at a hardware store to pay back the developer. Susan had moved into a small apartment and was working as a receptionist. Chloe had deleted her social media accounts and was working at a coffee shop, learning for the first time what actual labor felt like. They hadn't contacted me. The terms of Richard's probation included a no-contact order for the victim of his theft. Me. I dug a hole in the earth and placed a tulip bulb inside. People talk about revenge like it's a weapon, like it's something you do to someone. But as I covered the bulb with soil, patting it down gently, I realized that true justice isn't about destruction. It's about gardening. You don't hate the weed. You don't scream at the invasive vine that tries to choke your roses. You just remove it. You prune the dead branches so the tree can survive. You clear the space so the things you actually love can grow. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my knees. I looked at my garden. It was thriving. The colors were vibrant. The lines clean and strong. It was a space designed by me. For me. I wasn't the uninvited guest anymore. I was the owner of the house. And for the first time in my life, everything fit the aesthetic. If you've ever had to prune your own family tree to save your sanity, share this story. You are not alone.